Claws of Steel: How the Puma, the eight-wheeled phantom of the Third Reich, challenged steel titans. Imagine the Eastern Front, autumn of 1943. Mud up to the axles, slush that makes the blood freeze in your veins. Somewhere beyond the horizon, cannonade rumbles. You are the crew of the legendary T-34, the scourge of the Panzerwaffe. Your 34 is a steel fist, a symbol of power, a machine that has already sown a seed of doubt in the hearts of German tankers. You feel, if not invulnerable, then certainly in control of the situation. And suddenly your driver, peering into the periscope, says hoarsely, "I see something." Unclear. Not the low, tracked silhouette of a panther or a tiger, but something swift, squat, on wheels. 8 wheels. It doesn't crawl like ordinary armored vehicles. It rushes across the sodden dirt road at a speed that is almost unbelievable. It looks like a ghost, like a shadow flitting between the trees. You don't have time to command, armor-piercing, fire, when this shadow freezes for an instant and a sharp tongue of flame erupts from its turret. An eternity passes, maybe 2 seconds, and then a deafening blow, the screech of metal, the piercing shriek of steel tearing through your armor. You were incredibly lucky. The shell ricocheted, but the blinding flash and the ringing in your ears will be forever etched in your memory. Who was that? What was that? It's not a tank. It's something else. It's a Puma. This is how many encounters on the battlefields of World War II with this unique creation of German engineers happened. This is not just a story about another armored car. This is the story of an audacious attempt to rewrite the rules of war, to create a machine that was more dangerous than a snake, faster than a cheetah, and smarter than any other brainchild of tank building of that era. It is the story of how genius is born in hell, and why it was never allowed to change the world. Why wheels? Or the non-obvious genius of the armored car? Let's be frank. When we hear the phrase armored fighting vehicle, a tracked monster comes to mind, tearing up cubic meters of soil, breaking trees, and carrying a thick cannon. A tank, the king of the battlefield. But is it really that perfect? The Germans, known for their pedantry and love for systematic analysis, very quickly realized, no. Imagine the logistics of war. A tank, especially a heavy one, is not just a weapon. It's a headache. It is as gluttonous as a hungry hippopotamus. The range of a tiger on the highway was at most 150 kilometers. And then you need to find thousands of liters of quality fuel. It is heavy. It gets stuck in the mud. It needs strong bridges. It's difficult to transport by rail. It is complex. Training a tanker is a long and expensive process. Field repairs are a hell of wrenches, sweat, and curse words. And finally, it is expensive. Every tank is tons of quality steel, complex mechanisms, hours of highly skilled labor. Now, let's draw a portrait of the ideal soldier for certain tasks. Reconnaissance, deep raids behind enemy lines, hunting communications. He doesn't need thick armor, but speed and radar-like eyes. He doesn't need a giant caliber, but accuracy and surprise. He needs to be stealthy and omnipresent. And here's where the armored car enters the stage. Imagine a wolf versus a bear. The bear is stronger, its blow can tear the wolf in half. But the wolf is faster, more cunning. It can stalk its prey for hours, flanking it, exhausting it. It chooses the place and time for its single, decisive bite. The armored car is that very wolf. Its advantages became obvious. Mobility. On a good road, it left any tanks far behind. Range. 300, 400, 500 kilometers without refueling. That meant going on a deep raid and returning. Simplicity. The crew could consist of 3 or 4 men, and no higher engineering education was required to operate it. Cheapness. One Panther tank cost as much as several dozen Pumas. It's a question of strategic choice. One king or a whole squad of princes. But there was one problem that for a long time prevented armored cars from becoming a truly formidable force cross-country capability. A truck, even an armored one, would get stuck in the first swamp or deep snow. And the war was not fought on highways. The birth of the eight-legged Sd.Kfz.234, the breakthrough you haven't heard of. And here, German engineering thought made its first leap. If 4 wheels are too few, 6 are better, but still not enough. What if we make 8? And all 8 are driving wheels. In the early 30s, the Sd.Kfz.234 8-rad, 8-wheeled, was born. This was not just a converted truck. It was a combat platform designed from scratch. And it had several revolutionary solutions. First, all 8 wheels were driving and steering. Imagine that. The machine could maneuver virtuously on the narrow streets of European cities, turning almost on the spot. But the most fantastic thing, it could drive forward and backward at equally high speed. Imagine the situation. The Puma is spotted. It fires and, without turning around, rushes back at full speed, hiding in the smoke and folds of the terrain, while the enemy was just figuring out where to shoot. This was an absolute breakthrough in tactics. Second, independent suspension. Each wheel lived its own life, which provided incredible smoothness and stability on rough terrain. It wasn't an all-terrain vehicle in the class of tracked vehicles, but it came as close to that ideal as possible while remaining on wheels. The heart of this 8-wheeled plague was a 150-horsepower carburetor engine. For a machine weighing 8 tons, this gave a power-to-weight ratio of about 18.5 horsepower per ton. For those times, very decent. It could accelerate to 80 kilometers per hour on the highway, and its fuel range was enough for 300 kilometers. It was armed with a 20mm automatic cannon, the same as on the light tank Sd.Kfz.234, and their armor was comparable, about 15mm on the frontal projection. In essence, it was not an armored car, but a very fast and maneuverable light tank on wheels. The Germans built about 600 such machines, and they became the eyes and ears of the Wehrmacht. But this was only the first step. Evolution demanded a more perfect predator. The economy of war, steel versus aluminum, or why genius doesn't count. Before we move on to the Puma, let's stop for a minute and look at the big picture. War is not only shooting and attacks. It is first and foremost an economy. It is a giant machine for grinding up resources. By 1943, Germany began to experience a severe shortage of everything. But the most terrible shortage was in non-ferrous metals, especially aluminum and copper. And these very metals are the lifeblood of engine building and electronics. They are needed for aviation, airplanes, for the Navy, radars, communication systems, for engine production. And now let's remember our 8-wheeled genius. The new model, Sd.Kfz.234, which replaced the 231, received a load-bearing hull. That's progress. And a new engine. And here is the key point. The Germans installed a 210-horsepower Tatra air-cooled diesel engine on it. Why check? Because their own capacities were loaded with tanks and planes. And here we come to the main contradiction of German military production. People who thought in terms of the last war were at the helm. For them, the standard of power was the tank. Big, heavy, with a powerful gun. The Tiger, the Panther. They saw in them a trump card that could be played at any moment. And the Puma? It was a machine of new tactics. The tactics of maneuverable, high-speed combat. Tactics where it is important not to overpower, but to outplay. But to appreciate this tactic, one had to think in a new way. And the high command of the Wehrmacht, for all its talents, thought in old categories. And imagine a meeting at the Führer's headquarters. On one side, generals from the tank forces, demanding more and more steel for their cats. On the other, engineers showing blueprints of a fantastic wheeled machine. What will the leadership caught in the grip of a deficit choose? They will choose what is clearer, what seems more reliable. They will choose the tank. And this is the tragedy of the Puma. It was born at a time when its country could no longer afford the luxury of innovation. It needed brute force. The appearance to the world, Sd.Kfz.234 Puma, that very beast. And so, on the basis of this very Sd.Kfz.234, that very legend is born. Modification 234/2, which the soldiers immediately nicknamed the Puma. And this name was perfect. The puma is a predator of the cat family, but not a huge lion or tiger. It is a lone hunter that wins due to speed, agility, and an incredibly precise, deadly bite. The Puma became the only wheeled combat vehicle adopted by the elite armored forces, the Panzerwacht. That says a lot. The tankers, with their snobbery, recognized it as one of their own. Many modern experts call the Puma the world's first wheeled tank. And that is no exaggeration. What was so special about it? The main caliber. The Germans took and literally stuffed a long-barreled 50mm Kw-K-39-1 gun into its elegant turret. This is the very gun that was on the medium tank Sd.Kfz.234 of late series. It was a weapon that could penetrate most of the Allies' light and medium tanks through and through at ranges of up to a kilometer. Next to the gun was the legendary bone saw, the MG-42 machine gun, whose sound was one of the most recognizable and frightening on the battlefield. Armor. The front of the hull and turret was increased to 30mm. For comparison, the famous Soviet light tank T-60 had only 15 to 20mm of frontal armor. Of course, against heavy gun shells it was paper, but it reliably protected against bullets, shrapnel, and fire from small-caliber automatic cannons. The sides were thinner, 8 to 15mm, but the Puma's tactics did not involve exposing its sides to attack. The heart and legs. 210 horsepower under the hood accelerated this 11-ton cat to high speeds. The same 8 driving and steering wheels provided it with phenomenal cross-country ability and maneuverability. So who could it knock out? Almost everyone. Light tanks like the T-60, BT-7, American Stuarts, it was easy prey for it even from 1.5 kilometers. Medium tanks. This is where the real hunt began. The American Sherman in the standard M4A2 modification had 51mm of frontal armor. The Puma's long, 50mm barrel confidently penetrated this armor at distances of up to 500 to 600 meters. Our hero, the T-34 Model 42-43 with 45mm frontal armor at rational angles, was also in the zone of destruction. From 500 to 600 meters, the Puma's shell could decide the outcome of a duel. Of course, the T-34 crew did not sit idly by, and the 76mm gun of the 34 was deadly to the Puma at any range. But seconds decided everything. Who spotted first? Who fired first? Who was more accurate? And here the Puma had a trump card, its low silhouette and speed. It could jump out, fire, and disappear before the tankers even turned their turret. The Puma was the perfect tank destroyer in defense, especially in urban combat or wooded terrain. It was a pariah, a hunter from an ambush. Why were there so few? The tragedy of 101 cats. Here we come to the biggest pain and the biggest what if. Only 101 Pumas were produced. A figure that is simply negligible on the scale of the Second World War. For comparison, over 58,000 T-34s were built alone. Why? The economy we've already discussed. Non-ferrous metals, the complexity of producing a new turret, and it was very complex to manufacture. A general shortage of resources. Strategic choice. The German leadership bet on heavy tanks. The production of one Panther was equal to the production of 20 to 30 Pumas. They chose quality over quantity, but in a situation where the front stretched for thousands of kilometers, this choice was debatable. Time. The Puma appeared too late. In 1944, when it went into battle, Germany had already lost the strategic initiative and was fighting mainly in a stubborn defense. And in defense, the tactical advantages of the Puma speed, long-range raids, were leveled. Imagine for a minute that the Germans could have produced not 101, but say 1,000 or 1,500 Pumas back in 1943, and send them not to the front, where head-on clashes took place, but deep into the rear of the Soviet troops to destroy communications, warehouses, and headquarters. These steel packs could have sown chaos, acting like partisans, but at the level of army formations. They could have exhausted the enemy, forcing him to constantly look back. This did not happen, but the very possibility makes you think. The legacy of the Puma, a lesson still taught today. After the war, the Puma was forgotten. It seemed that the era of wheeled tanks had never arrived. But its spirit, its concept did not die. Look at modern armies. The French AMX-10RC, the Italian Centauro, the South African Roycat, our own combat reconnaissance vehicles. What are they, if not the spiritual heirs of the Puma? These are heavily armed, high-speed wheeled vehicles capable of fighting tanks and performing reconnaissance tasks. The concept of the wheeled tank is alive and well because it is ideal for local conflicts, peacekeeping operations, where strategic mobility is important, the ability to quickly transfer equipment over thousands of kilometers. A track tank is difficult and expensive to transport, while a wheeled tank can be quickly delivered by plane and is ready for battle. The German engineers of the 40s, without knowing it, created a benchmark that is still followed today. They proved that strength is not always in the thickness of the armor. Sometimes it is in the speed of thought, in the courage of an engineering decision, in the willingness to go against established dogmas. The Puma remained a shadow that flickered on the battlefields of World War II. A beautiful, deadly, but elusive and ultimately tragic shadow. It was dangerous even for the T-34, but it turned out to be powerless against the soulless machine of war, economic crisis, and the misunderstanding of the generals. This is the story of how genius was late by just a couple of years. The story of a machine that could have changed a lot, but never got its chance. So, our story about the Steel Puma has come to an end. It was formidable, fast, and lonely. What do you think? Write in the comments. In your opinion, if not 101, but 10 times more Pumas had been produced, could they have seriously influenced the course of the war? Or was their fate predetermined? Your opinion is extremely important to me. Don't forget to like if you found it interesting, and subscribe to the channel. Many more stories about forgotten weapons, brilliant engineers, and turning points in history await you. See you soon.